Meat targets, quote unquote, for ballistic testing is junk science, and we're going to show you why. Hey everybody, welcome back to the LocaCarnivore, the hunting, guns, and adventure channel for smart people, and you're smart because you're watching us. Well, today we're talking about the meat target thing out there. And why did we decide to do a video on meat targets today? We got a comment a while back from an individual. I'm not going to give them the press, the free PR of naming them, but you can go down and search in the comments if you want to find them. Don't forget to comment on our videos because we use a lot of those comments to help get ideas for new videos as well as improve the quality of the videos that we are doing. So do go down there, tear it up in the comments section. But at any rate, this person replied to one of our Frost Giant gel test videos that, quote, so let's talk about the science and why of ballistics testing very briefly, and then why the meat target thing, how that got started, and then why that's not necessarily, it's not a very scientific way to test handgun bullets. All that said, there is another way of testing out there. There's a gazillion ways. I mean, people are shooting at dinner plates, they're shooting at plywood, they're shooting at, quarter-inch steel. I mean, how many times do you face somebody that's behind quarter-inch steel? I mean, think about that. 6x6 wood posts. I mean, if you're trying to blast through cover like that, put the small arms aside, and it's time for the AT-4 rocket at that point. All right, so let's talk a little bit about how the meat target thing got started. It is, as far as I can tell, the brainchild of the wonderful Mr. Paul Harrell. Hopefully you've seen Paul's videos. I love his videos. This is not anything about Paul Harrell, please. I really like the guy. I think he's just a super presenter. He's got that wonderful, soft, very sincere, look you straight in the eye kind of presentation. And he's really he's a role model, basically. For when I do my videos, I think, could I do them as well as Paul? You can comment about that one way or the other. Here come the haters. At any rate, like I said, this is nothing about Paul. I really like Paul's stuff. I like Paul himself. I've never met the man. Unfortunately, never had an opportunity to meet the man. And I think we probably would have gotten along famously. But basically, Paul came up with this notion to illustrate, for video purposes, the effects of various handgun bullets, just what they do when they hit stuff. And I think Paul, if we had a conversation about it, would probably be one of the first to admit that his meat target is not scientific. It is for illustrative purposes, as we like to say in the business. It's to make a point and to provide good visuals for the video. And let's face it, everybody that's on YouTube, myself included, we're a business. And primarily, the first and foremost, we want to generate attention. It's your clicks and your views and the duration of the views and all this sort of stuff that feeds an algorithm that either promotes your videos to other people or dampens them down. And let's be honest, Paul's original videos, if you go back and look at his first stuff, was designed to promote in a roundabout way the business that he had going at the time, and which is lovely. I mean, that's how you do it. That's how you make money in America. Nothing wrong with that. So what is a meat target? What Paul Harrell put together, and I'm not going to intersperse bits of his videos. Frankly, I think that, clipping other people's videos out and doing all this sort of stuff is one of the laziest forms of trying to make a living on YouTube you can come up with. Now, there's people out there that do wonderful stuff, like John Correa over at Active Self-Protection. He's marvelous, but he's using publicly available videos to teach and to inform. And what he does is super. I don't think it's lazy at all. He puts a lot of effort into it. Hey, remember to subscribe. Give us a big thumbs up and like us. And don't forget to ring that bell. Now, if you go back, and I went back and reviewed Paul Harrell's videos and went quite a ways back and quite a ways forward in time, and his meat target evolved as he went along. And when he first started out was a bag of oranges, and then he put some pork ribs on one side and some pork ribs on the other side, and then he duct taped the whole mess together to keep it from falling apart. and he put as what he calls the high-tech fleece bullet backstop behind the whole mess to catch the bullets that would go through, because he was pretty sure he was going to get a lot of penetration on some of the rounds at least, and he did. So it was an attempt by him to come up with some way to illustrate some relative amount of what happens when various bullets hit something that, you know, is kind of like hitting a human being, but it's not anywhere near really what it is a human being. Now, Paul's meat target evolved from just that sack of oranges with the pork ribs wrapped up with duct tape, and eventually he started putting t-shirt material in front of it to simulate clothing. I guess he'd probably get any feedback or just thinking about the whole process himself. He went ahead and put some t-shirt material over that. And then later on, as he evolved, he figured out, hey, well, human beings, when you think about it, they've got clothes, and then what do they got? They're made up. They've got clothes, then they have skin, and then they have like their muscles and bones. And we're talking about the thoracic cavity here. He wasn't worried about the rest of it. And then you get into lungs, although we have heart and major blood vessels and all sorts of stuff in there. Then you get to the ribs on the other side, assuming you don't hit the spine, and then skin again, and whatever clothing they have on the back of them. So to do the skin thing, he started putting leather jackets over that, or pieces of leather. So he would get the t-shirt material and he'd put it over the leather jacket. Well, that was all well and good, and it seems like, you know, kind of a valid thing, because he had the oranges in there and they're all pulpy and all this sort of stuff, and then he had some skin and he's got clothing on it and all that, and then, you know, what would basically be pectoral muscle or the muscles in or between the ribs and that sort of thing, and the ribs themselves. So it sounds like, hey, that's not such a bad thing. I mean, it sounds kind of like how human beings put together. So let's deconstruct each of the elements in turn and discover why they are a poor analog for what happens when a bullet hits a human being. You know, the LocaCarnivore project has only one means of support at this point in time. We don't have any advertisers or affiliates or any of that sort of business. So we depend solely on you, our viewers, and the way you can support us is to go down to the link in the description to our Patreon, go over, show us a little love, throw us some cash, you'll get some good stuff in return as well, and we really appreciate it. But let's talk about the leather jacket part. And so the t-shirt's fine, but let's talk about the leather jacket part, or any of the leather. The leather he was using, that Paul uses, is cowhide. And even if you get it from the absolute thinnest part, which is the belly and the inside of the rear leg and stuff, which is where generally the thinnest skin for the most part on most mammals is, it is still way thicker than human skin. In fact, human skin, as far as a bullet is concerned, is almost transparent. It's just a little more resistance, basically, it offers to the bullet than almost the air that the bullet passed through in order to get to that skin. So this is way too heavy. And on top of that, with the skin, quote unquote, Paul had nothing that would simulate the fat. And humans have fat tissue. Even very lean human beings have fat tissue, and your average person anymore has a tremendous amount of fat tissue. Don't get me started on that. So he didn't put anything for fat tissue in there because his rib package was just lean meat with ribs. And we're going to talk about that in a second. So Paul had his t-shirt material and then his leather skin. And then what's the next thing? Duct tape. There's duct tape to hold this mess together, to hold the ribs and all that stuff to the bag of oranges. Duct tape is yet another thing. And unless you're attacked by some maniac that's wrapped themselves in duct tape, and by the way, thick duct tape, when you get like to an inch of duct tape or even a half inch of duct tape, it's pretty resistant to bullets. It's amazing how good. I think Mythbuster did something about duct tape sometime. Go check it out or wherever. But duct tape is really actually very heavy. It's got a mesh fabric in there for ripstop purposes, so it doesn't tear easily at all. So you're adding a layer of very resistive material, which would not normally be found in a human assailant, to the equation. So already the experiment is getting severely altered, and we're diverging off what would be a good analog for a human being. Don't forget to share this video with everybody. Share it with your friends. Share it with the people you don't like. Just share it. Thank you. So once you get through the duct tape, what's next on the meat target? Well, pork ribs. Paul would get some pork ribs from a butcher shop. or a meat market or whatever. And so you had the ribs, and then you had the meat in between the ribs, and he was saying this was simulating the pectoral muscle on a human being. Well, he didn't have any extra muscle on top of the ribs, because you have pectoral muscle, then the ribs, and then the inner rib material there as well. So there's a problem with that already. And so here's, I don't have any pork ribs, but just to illustrate another point, this is ground pork, and it's packaged in vacuum packing from the butcher. So the big problem here is the wrapper, the vacuum seal bag on here. Human beings don't have vacuum seal bags wrapped around their torsos. It's just that simple. Nothing, and this plastic is a very different kind of material. It is nothing like anything you're going to find in a mammalian body. The next thing after the ribs, as you get into the thoracic cavity, would be the pleural lining, but that's just, if you've ever taken a deer apart or an elk or something, it's just a membrane. The pleural lining is not a really super heavy duty thing. It's just a membrane, and then you're into the lung tissue itself. And we're going to talk about that in a second. You know, the LocaCarnivore website has some wonderful content over there as well, plus a link to our store. Yeah, we've got to try to make a buck here, so we have a store. You can get some really great LocaCarnivore branded merchandise, use it as gifts, wear it around. We'd appreciate your support in that area too. So go over there, the link's down in the description. Thanks. So what's next? After he goes through the ribs, then he has oranges. Now, oddly enough, you'd think at the sprawling LocaCarnivore headquarters complex here at the employee cafeteria, we would have some oranges on hand. Well, we didn't have any oranges, so I'm going to have to kind of talk about it with using one of my dog's chew toys, which this is one of their favorites, is this big yellow ball. But it just still illustrates sort of an orange. If you haven't seen an orange by now, I don't know what to do for you. You've obviously been on a deserted island that has no citrus fruit, and we just don't have anything in common. So you can go find a video on oranges. At any rate, the idea behind the oranges is that's supposed to simulate the lung tissue. And because oranges, when they're on the, on the inside, they're kind of pulpy and everything, and that kind of makes sense because you think, oh, lungs are like really pulpy and stuff. Well, first of all, the problem with the oranges, to get to the pulp, you have to go through the rind. You have to go through the rind. And what oranges are you using? I mean, there's thin-skinned oranges, there's thick-skinned oranges, and on top of that, there's nothing in a human body, in a mammalian torso, in a mammalian thorax, that is anywhere close in structure to orange peels, to orange rind. So that's going to affect the bullet completely different. The other thing is you've got a bunch of these spherical things in a bag, and so there's gaps and stuff, and so you maybe are hitting an orange straight on, you might be deflecting through, you might actually miss a bunch of oranges, so instead of hitting all of them in succession, like 1, 2, 3 in succession, you might just hit the one at the back after going through gaps. So there's gaps and all this sort of stuff. So it's completely random, it's completely inconsistent. There's no guarantee that you're going to hit an orange or all of the oranges you need to hit, and so the bullet effect is going to be different if it hits 1 orange versus 3 oranges versus no oranges. And again, it's completely inconsistent, which ignores that repeatability requirement for science. So the other real big problem, despite the rind and all that stuff, is you get into the pulpy heart of an orange. It's not like what a lung is. A lung is basically a giant airbag. It's full of all these little passages that let the air that you breathe in through your trachea goes down, and then it goes down into smaller and smaller passages, and all those passages they sift off all the other gases and allow the oxygen to pass through the membranes of the blood vessels and then oxygenate the blood and then go to the heart and get pumped and all that sort of stuff. So that's how lungs work. So lungs are mainly, yeah, they seem a little pulpy, but they're mainly filled with air. In a live animal, in a live mammal, they're mainly filled with air at the time the bullet would hit. That's full of air. And then you have the tissue, which is 90% water. So it's hard to stimulate lung tissue per se, and there's no good analog for lung tissue other than lung tissues. So an orange has nothing to do with a lung. So there's another big problem. Let's talk about that pork rib package once again. Besides the problem of the vacuum seal bag around it, you also have the issue of it is dead tissue. And dead tissue is very different in its composition and its qualities from live tissue. Bone is also different between dead bone and live bone. What's the reason for that? Couple: temperature and blood content, circulation. First of all, in order to get this even halfway close, Anybody using a meat target would have to have their pork rib package heated to 98.6 degrees, in other words, human body temperature. And I've seen tests done, and I'm just going to, cite Paul again. He's done tests that are in temperatures as low as 17 degrees and as hot as probably 80 or 90 degrees, which is getting closer or whatever. But you would have to have those ribs, that rib pack, at 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit in order to be as close as possible to live tissue. The other problem is you would have to pump it full of blood, because there is blood in live tissue. It's circulating all the time, and that's going to alter the pliability of the muscle tissue, and it's completely different from dead tissue. And the other thing is, if you've ever dressed and then butchered, say, a game animal or even a domesticated animal, and you will find there's a big difference between handling that tissue right after death. I mean, immediately post-mortem, say 5-10 minutes, whatever it takes you to get to that downed animal, and then maybe handling the tissue as you're butchering it out, say at the end of the day or even the next day or something, because it has gone through rigor mortis, the blood has drained and pooled out of it, and the oxygen content is completely different. So it is a different tissue, and dead tissue, especially dead tissue that is way beyond initial mortality, is very different from that actual live tissue. Let's talk about bone. Bone is very different when it is live versus when it is dead, post-mortem. Live bone has blood running through the core of the bone, through the marrow, and it has a very springy quality to it. Live bone is very springy. Otherwise, think about it. When you're a kid and you were jumping off the front porch or something, if your bones weren't flexible as live bone, they would have snapped immediately as soon as you landed. And obviously human beings, when they go walking around, their legs aren't snapping left and right. So there's got to be something to it. So that's just it. Live bone is flexible, and it's very difficult to come up with an analog for live bone. I've talked to a number of people that are in the anatomy business and also people that make anatomical analogs, and they say that's the hardest thing to duplicate. There is not an artificial material out there, and there is no post-mortem bone tissue that is suitable for a direct analog for bone. So that's the other problem with this whole thing. Well, there you have it in sort of a nutshell. It's a long, involved explanation, but it's a complicated business. It's a complicated subject. And scientists are continually grappling with trying to duplicate and find a proper analog for a mammalian body to simulate what happens when a bullet hits it in order to have a consistent test medium. So basically, a meat target is not scientific by any stretch. In fact, it's not scientific at all. It's not repeatable, it's not consistent, and it does not have a methodology that allows other researchers to use the same process and get similar results. And those are essential qualities to any scientific research. What YouTube ballistic testing is all about is, at the end of the day, it's entertainment. Hopefully it's informative entertainment, but it's going to be only entertainment. It's not pure science. Well, that about wraps it up. Thank you so much for spending your valuable time here with us at the LocaCarnivore. We do appreciate it. Remember, the ultimate act of resistance is insisting upon facts.